It was a Friday evening, just like any other. Except this time, Sarah came home wearing a perfume I didn't recognize. Now, I'm not the type to keep track of those things. Usually, I wouldn't notice if she changed her hair color. But this smell, it was sharp, floral, but not in that sweet way she liked. It clung to her like a bad memory. She walked past me, a little too quickly, her heels clicking across the wooden floor like they were in a rush to escape. "Long day?" I asked, my eyes lingering on her more than usual. "Yeah. Exhausted," she replied, tossing her purse onto the counter. "I'm going to take a shower." I just nodded, feeling that familiar grip of routine loosen a little. Maybe it was nothing. But, you know how your gut sometimes whispers to you when something's wrong? This wasn't a whisper. This was a scream. Sarah hadn't been herself lately, but I'd brushed it off, blaming stress, work, whatever made sense at the time. But the way she moved tonight, the way her eyes avoided mine, it felt like watching someone act. You ever feel that? When someone so close to you suddenly seems like a stranger, like you're just another person in their day they have to get through? I stood there, staring at the door to the bathroom. The water was running, steam rising from under the door. I don't know what made me do it, but something pulled me toward her purse. I felt my heart rate spike just standing next to it. I knew I shouldn't, but my hands moved like they had a mind of their own. The zipper made this ugly, metallic sound as I opened it, and there, buried between her wallet and makeup bag, was something I couldn't ignore. A hotel key card. The name of the hotel stared back at me. The same one downtown, the one we used to go to for anniversaries. What the hell was this doing here? My mind raced. Sarah never mentioned anything about staying at a hotel. She worked late sometimes, sure, but I knew she was too organized, too predictable to leave something like this lying around if it wasn't supposed to be there. This was a mistake on her part. A big one. I don't know how long I stood there, just staring at that card, the weight of it pressing into my palm like it was heavy with every possibility running through my head. It felt like time stopped. I heard the water shut off, her feet padding across the bathroom tiles. I slipped the key back into her purse and stepped away from the counter like I'd touched something toxic. By the time she came out of the bathroom, towel wrapped around her, I was sitting on the couch, pretending to be focused on the TV. But all I could think about was that key. It sat there like a silent confession in her bag, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the life I thought I had with Sarah was already crumbling, and I had no idea how deep the cracks went. Something was wrong. And I was about to find out just how wrong it was. Saturday came around, and I wasn't myself. I couldn't stop thinking about that hotel key. It had a grip on me. Sarah was in the kitchen, making breakfast like she always did on weekends, humming quietly to herself. She looked so normal. It was unsettling. I couldn't just sit there, pretending nothing was wrong, so I made a decision. Let's get out today. Maybe grab lunch downtown? I suggested, trying to keep my voice even. Sarah looked up from the stove, a flicker of hesitation crossing her face. Downtown? I thought you hated going there on weekends, too crowded, remember? I don't know, I said, shrugging. Just thought it'd be nice to do something different. She paused for a moment, then nodded. Sure. Why not? We got into the car, and I drove with a purpose I hoped she wouldn't notice. The hotel wasn't far, but I was running scenarios in my head, figuring out what I'd do once we were near it. I didn't even know what I was looking for, but I couldn't let it go. When we got close, I started slowing down, pretending to look for parking. The hotel stood there, clean and professional, a place I knew too well from those anniversary weekends. But today, it felt different. Today, it wasn't a place filled with good memories, it was the scene of something else entirely. I pulled into a spot across the street, turning off the engine. Sarah glanced at me, then out the window, her fingers fidgeting with her phone. "Why are we stopping here?" she asked, her tone suddenly cautious. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I watched her, waiting for something, anything. When I saw the shift in her eyes, the way she blinked a little too fast, my stomach dropped. "You tell me," I said, nodding toward the hotel. She froze. Just for a second, but that was enough. She caught herself quickly, her face hardening into something I didn't recognize. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb with me, Sarah. My voice was steady, but it felt like I was holding something back, something that wanted to tear through the surface. I found the key in your bag. Her mouth opened, then closed, like she was trying to find the right lie, the perfect excuse. But nothing came out. The silence between us stretched long enough to snap. It's not what you think, she said, finally, her voice tight. I was there for work. Work? I repeated, the disbelief thick in my throat. Since when do you have meetings at hotels? I don't, she shot back, sharper than I expected. It was just a one-off thing. A client wanted to meet somewhere private. Private? I repeated, my patience burning away. Do I look like an idiot? Her face flushed red, either from anger or panic. You don't understand. It was just a meeting. Just a meeting, I said, my voice rising. At the same hotel we used to stay at, right? I saw her flinch at that. For a moment, there was a crack in her composure, like she realized just how badly she'd screwed up. But she held her ground. You're making this bigger than it is. It meant nothing. Nothing. That word punched me right in the gut. Because now I knew. The one thing I'd been dreading, the thing I didn't want to believe it was true. Who is he? I asked, the question coming out cold, sharp. No hesitation. She looked away, staring out the window, her hands clenched into fists in her lap. She didn't say a word. And that silence? It told me everything I needed to know. I didn't give her the chance to hide behind that silence for long. My patience snapped. Who the hell is he? I repeated, louder this time, leaning toward her. My voice filled the car like it had its own pulse, but Sarah stayed glued to the window, refusing to look at me. It was like I wasn't even there. That did it. I slammed my fist on the dashboard, the sound jolting through the car. Look at me. I yelled. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, my breath coming quicker. Say something, damn it. She turned slowly, her expression hard, eyes narrowing like I was the one in the wrong. Fine, she snapped. You want the truth? You really want to know? His name is James. That hit me harder than I expected. I thought I was ready, thought I'd braced myself. But hearing her say it out loud, like it was nothing, like she was just ticking off an item on a grocery list, it made my skin crawl. I felt my fists clenching, nails digging into my palms. How long? I asked, barely recognizing my own voice. She looked at me then, but it wasn't the Sarah I knew. It was someone else, someone distant, cold. A few months. A few months. The words hit me in waves, each one heavier than the last. Months. That meant all the times we had dinner, all the times we laughed over stupid TV shows, all the times I kissed her goodnight. It was all a lie. She'd been with someone else, living this twisted double life while I thought everything was fine. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling of the car, trying to pull myself together. But something inside me broke right then. Why? I asked, my voice rough. Why the hell would you do this? She crossed her arms, defensive. I didn't plan it, all right? It just happened. It just happened, I repeated, feeling the anger rise again. You don't just happen to cheat on your husband, Sarah. That's a choice. You chose this. Her face twisted with frustration. I didn't want this to come out like this. I didn't want to hurt you. Too late for that, I snapped. You've been lying to me for months, sleeping with someone else, and now what? You're suddenly sorry? Is that supposed to fix everything? She threw up her hands, exasperated. I'm not saying that. I'm just. She stopped herself, shaking her head like she didn't even know what to say next. I'm saying I didn't mean for it to get this far. I was unhappy. Unhappy. I couldn't help but laugh, a bitter, hollow sound. So that's your excuse? You were unhappy, so you thought screwing someone else was the solution? You couldn't talk to me, couldn't say a damn word? She stared at me, her jaw tight. You wouldn't understand. That was it. That line right there. Something inside me snapped, like a wire pulled too tight. I grabbed the steering wheel, gripping it so hard my knuckles turned white, resisting the urge to scream at her. You don't get to do this, I said, voice low and dangerous. You don't get to act like the victim here. You're the one who lied, who betrayed me, and now you're sitting here acting like I'm the one who wouldn't understand. You're unbelievable. She said nothing, just sat there with that hard, cold expression on her face, like she'd already made up her mind about me, about us. I could feel my chest tightening, the weight of everything crashing down on me, and I didn't know what to do with it. I wanted to hurt her. Maybe not physically, but I wanted her to feel something, to know the kind of pain she'd put me through. She couldn't just walk away from this without consequences. That's when I made the decision. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, my mind racing. She thought she could just sit there, shrugging this off, giving me excuses. But I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Not this easily. Without saying a word, I threw the car into gear and pulled out of the parking lot, faster than I should have. Sarah flinched at the sudden movement but didn't say anything. Good. She didn't deserve to speak. Not right now. I didn't take us home. Instead, I drove straight to her office. The one she'd been going to for years, where everyone thought they knew her, Mrs. Perfect, the loyal wife, the dedicated employee. I wanted to rip that image apart. What are you doing? She finally asked, her voice sharp with panic as we got closer to the office building. I'm giving you what you deserve, I said, my eyes fixed on the road. She didn't say anything after that, probably realizing she wasn't in control anymore. I parked right in front of the office and got out of the car, slamming the door behind me. She followed, her face pale, but I didn't give her a chance to explain or stop me. I marched up to the glass front doors, yanked them open, and headed straight to the reception desk. Is James here? I asked, loud enough for everyone in the lobby to hear. The receptionist blinked at me, confused. James who? James, I said, turning to Sarah, who was standing behind me, her face frozen in horror. You know which James, right, Sarah? Her eyes widened, and she stepped forward, trying to grab my arm. Stop. What are you doing? I pulled away from her. I'm just introducing myself to your lover. Isn't that the least I deserve? I looked around the office, hoping someone knew him, hoping this would explode the way I wanted it to. I wanted them all to see her for what she really was. Who is James? One of her colleagues asked, walking over, looking between us with suspicion. He's the guy screwing my wife, I said, voice clear and steady, making sure every person nearby heard it. Sarah gasped behind me, and I could hear her scrambling to fix this, saying my name like it would somehow undo everything. But it was too late. The attention of the room shifted, eyes moving from me to her, whispers starting. She stepped in front of me, her face flushed red. You need to stop this. Now. I looked her dead in the eyes. No, Sarah. I'm just getting started. She didn't have a response to that. Instead, she turned on her heel and marched back out the door, her whole body tense with rage and embarrassment. I followed her, the cold satisfaction already setting in. I wanted her to feel even a fraction of the humiliation I felt. I wanted to ruin the world she'd built behind my back. By the time we were back in the car, she was shaking, her fists clenched in her lap. Are you proud of yourself? She snapped, her voice trembling. Did that make you feel better? I didn't answer immediately. I just started the car and pulled away from the building. But her words echoed in my head. Did it make me feel better? Maybe. Maybe not. But she needed to know what it felt like to have her life ripped apart. To have her secrets dragged out in front of everyone. It's not about feeling better, I said finally, my voice flat. It's about making sure you understand that you don't just get to do this without consequences. She didn't respond, staring out the window, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. I kept driving, not really knowing where we were headed. There wasn't any plan beyond making her life as miserable as I felt in that moment. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. This little act of revenge, it wasn't enough. Nothing could ever really make this right. Not after what she did. But at least now, she knew what it felt like to lose control. To have something she cared about torn apart in front of her. And that, for now, was enough. We drove in silence for what felt like hours, though it was probably only 15 minutes. I didn't care where we were going, and I'm sure she didn't either. The reality of everything was sinking in. For the first time since this all started, I realized there wasn't much more to say. The shouting, the accusations, the revenge, it hadn't changed a thing. We were still here, sitting next to each other in the car, broken beyond repair. I pulled over at some random parking lot. The sun was starting to set, casting a strange light over everything. Neither of us moved or spoke. I think we both knew what was coming. "You ruined us, Sarah," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I didn't have the energy for more anger. I was just tired. She didn't look at me, just stared straight ahead, her hands resting in her lap. I know. There was no defense left. No more excuses, no more lies. Just the truth hanging between us like a wall we couldn't climb over. "How long were you planning on keeping this up?" I asked, not even sure I wanted to know. "Were you just waiting for me to find out? Or was this going to go on forever?" She finally turned to face me, her eyes red and swollen, though no tears were coming now. "I didn't think that far ahead," she admitted. "It wasn't supposed to happen. But once it did. I don't know. I didn't know how to stop." Her honesty wasn't comforting. In fact, it made me feel worse. Because there was no big reason, no complex story, no hidden struggle she was facing. She just let it happen. Let it destroy us without a second thought. "What are we supposed to do now?" I asked, my voice raw. I wanted an answer. I wanted her to tell me how to fix something that couldn't be fixed. But she didn't have one. "I don't know," she said quietly. "I wish I did." I shook my head, running my hands through my hair. "You made this choice, Sarah. You destroyed everything we built. For what? For some guy you barely know?" "I know him," she said softly, and that was enough to make me hate her all over again. "Do you love him?" I asked, cutting through the air like a knife. I needed to know, even if the answer would break me. She hesitated, just for a second, but it felt like an eternity. Then, in a voice so small I barely heard it, she said, "I don't know." That was the final nail. That was when I realized there was no coming back from this. No salvaging the life we once had. She didn't even know if she loved the man she threw everything away for. It was like she had gambled our entire marriage on a whim, not caring about the consequences until it was too late. "I can't stay," I said, breaking the silence. "I can't forgive this." Sarah looked at me then, really looked at me, as if the reality of what she'd done was finally hitting her. "I never wanted to hurt you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I swear I didn't." "Doesn't matter," I said, the finality of it weighing down every word. "You did. And I can't keep pretending like we can fix this. You killed it, Sarah." She started crying then, soft and quiet, no hysterics. Just a steady flow of tears running down her face. For the first time since I found out, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But the pain she caused was too much to push aside. I took a deep breath and finally said the words that had been building in me since this started. "We're done." She didn't argue. She didn't beg me to stay. We both knew it was over. The person I thought she was, the marriage we thought we had, it was gone. I stared out the window, wondering if this was how it always ends. Not with a bang, but with an exhausted, resigned acceptance. "You should go stay somewhere else," I said, my voice flat. "Tonight." Sarah wiped her eyes, nodding slowly. Okay. And that was it. 7 years of marriage, undone in a single conversation. I didn't feel any satisfaction, no relief. Just emptiness. Like there was nothing left to feel. She got out of the car without another word, not looking back as she walked away. I stayed parked there for a while, letting the quiet settle in. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart, not mine. But the truth was, it was over. There was nothing left to save. When I got back to the house, it felt empty in a way it never had before. I stood in the doorway for a second, letting it all sink in. Sarah was gone, and with her, any idea of what my life used to be. The silence in the house didn't bother me, though. If anything, it was a relief. I didn't have to pretend anymore, didn't have to keep up the act of being okay when everything was crumbling inside. I grabbed a beer from the fridge, sat down at the table, and just stared at nothing. The anger, the betrayal, the disbelief, it was all still there, swirling around in my head. But underneath it, there was something else creeping in. A strange calm. Maybe that was what acceptance felt like. Not peace, exactly, but the understanding that some things are just done. It was weird, thinking about everything we'd built, all those years, and how it could disappear in a matter of days. But there was no use in dwelling on that anymore. I'd spent enough time trying to figure out why she did it, what went wrong, how I didn't see it coming. In the end, none of it mattered. She made her choice, and that was the end of it. I'd been running over all the ways this could go. Divorce, obviously. I wasn't the kind of guy to forgive something like this. It wasn't in me. Some people can move past it, work through the mess, but not me. There was no fixing this. So, what's next? That question kept playing in my head. What the hell do you do when the life you thought you'd have is just gone? The thing is, I hadn't figured that part out yet. But I knew one thing: I wasn't going to sit here and feel sorry for myself forever. I wasn't going to let what she did define the rest of my life. I started thinking about the day after tomorrow. About work, about calling a lawyer, about moving on. All the practical stuff. The emotions were still there, sure, but I was done letting them control me. I'd spent too much time in my head, replaying everything, and that wasn't going to help. I had to take the next step. I stood up, walked around the house, and started picking up the things that were hers: clothes, shoes, little reminders of her scattered everywhere. I didn't pack them neatly. I just wanted them out of my sight. Each piece I picked up felt lighter than the last, like I was taking back pieces of my own life. By the time I was done, it wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't even about her. It was about moving forward, however that looked. Maybe I'd feel differently tomorrow. Maybe I'd break down, get angry all over again, but right now, this was enough. As I stood there, looking at the box of her things, I realized I wasn't the same person I was a few days ago. I'd learned something, even if it was something I never wanted to learn. Trust doesn't just break, it shatters. And once it's gone, you can't rebuild it from the pieces. You have to start fresh. Not for her. Not for anyone else. But for yourself. I picked up the box, carried it out to the garage, and closed the door behind me. When I walked back inside, I didn't feel the weight of the last few days as much anymore. It was there, sure, but it didn't own me. I wasn't a victim. I was just a guy who'd been through something he didn't see coming. And I'd be fine. Eventually. That's how it ended for me. Not with some big revelation, not with some dramatic goodbye. Just a quiet moment, standing in my own house, knowing that I was still here. Still standing. And that was enough for now. The rest, I'd figure out later.